So, I mean, this search, clearly a lot of eyes were on this, but I want to start with this. First off, where you found these women, was it a snowmobile trail that they were on?
They originally were on the snowmobile trail, but they actually ended up um, leaving the snowmobile trail at a intersection and just kept going straight. The snowmobile trail actually turned a 90-degree turn to the left, and then they kept going straight. But of course, we actually had probably close to 6 inches of snow on whatever Thursday or Friday, and um, so all of those tracks were essentially covered, and the ground, the snow was frozen very, very hard. So actually, because their vehicle was so light, it was a small SUV, it was actually able to stay kind of on top of the snow. So their tracks were pretty hard to see if you really weren't keyed in and looking for it.
So what were they on that where they actually got stuck? Was it a logging trail
Just a logging road. Yeah, it was a dead end logging road. They were pointed and headed in towards Nicotawas Lake is where the road, but it actually stopped, a considerable distance prior to the lake. So
So were you able to follow their tracks or were their tracks covered?
uh, basically in the morning, we were all each game warden, forest ranger, we were all assigned areas to search. I was assigned to search Township 39 and Township 40, and basically run out every logging road that we could find by snowmobile. Late in the afternoon, I had gotten basically all of my area done uh, that I could see. So I kind of started looking at the map and saying, well, I'm going to run the snowmobile trail that goes up on the west side of Nicotawas Lake and, see. I didn't know if it had been covered yet or not. I assumed it had, but, and then I had actually looked and saw some other roads to the south, but in turn, I decided to go to the north. Um, and just a short distance from where I was figuring out where I wanted to go to where they were was probably less than a mile. It was pretty lucky in that aspect. I'd driven. I got on the snowmobile trail, which it's groomed by big machines and it makes the trails very, very hard. So you couldn't see a track if you wanted to, um, especially since we'd had the snow. So
Mhm.
I came to the intersection and um, I just did what I always had done is, look for the obvious. Um, and it looked like there might be a depression in the snow, but it was hard to tell. So I said, well, there's only one way to find out. So I drove further up in the road, probably another couple hundred yards, and I was able to see that it was clearly a vehicle track and it was a narrow wheelbase, which fit what Kim was driving. So I just continued going in the road, and probably half, 3/4 of a mile later, came around the corner and there's the car. It was all covered with snow. Um, didn't look like anybody had been around it. I could see beyond the car that there was a couple of sets of foot tracks that went away from the car. Couldn't tell whether they came back, and so I stopped, shut my snowmobile off, and at that point, I'm processing what I need to, what's next, because the fact of the matter, they've been in the woods for missing essentially for 4 days. It's been below zero, very cold. So I hollered. I said, hello, game warden. And I did it twice. And just a few seconds later, the door opened to the car. And she just she didn't even step out onto the ground. She just kind of peered around and she goes, hello. And I said, Kim? She goes, how did you know my name? And I says, we've been looking for you. So I went up and I talked to them both for a few minutes and made sure they were okay. And they were essentially very cold, but they were okay. So I said, listen, I said, I've got to go. There was no cell phone service where I was. So I went out, thought I could find some, I couldn't. So I used my radio and called out. But while I was talking to him, I said, are you thirsty, hungry? Yes, yes. So I had what I had in my lunch. So I gave him everything that I had, and I left, went out, and made some notifications to my bosses and to the Bangor State Police Barracks, and so that we could get some resources moving towards them, because it is in an extremely remote area. There's nothing, essentially it's just logging roads is all there is in that entire area.
Brad, it sounds like you were, and correct me if I'm wrong, were you sort of mentally preparing when you came upon that car? Were you sort of mentally preparing for the fact that you may be finding these women dead?
Yes, absolutely. That's as good a description as you could ask for.
And so what was your reaction when she popped open that door and said hello?
I would have liked to have had somebody take a picture of my face to see what I was actually, because it was pretty, I was amazed. We knew the last place that the cell phone was pinged was in Burlington back Wednesday night. So it was a long time from the time that they were missing to the time, obviously, that we were able to locate them. And when I was talking with them, they ran out of gas a day and a half prior.
Wow.
So Friday night it was 10 below or colder. Saturday night was very similar temperature wise. So the elements were not in their favor at all.
So, and before that, had they been stuck there for a while?
They got stuck Wednesday night, from everything that we could tell.
Wow.
They had gone in through Burlington and ended up getting on the Morrison Ridge Road, followed the Morrison Ridge Road, and ended up hitting the snowmobile trail, and followed that for just a very short distance before they went straight onto the road that they ended up at. So whether they hit other roads prior to that, I don't, we don't know that, but
so they're without food and water. It's cold. I mean, in your experience, the chances of surviving something like this seem pretty low.
Very remote. Believe me, when the door opened in the car, I was totally shocked. And I've been in 22 years, I've never had anything happen like that since I've been working, by any means.
So you must be feeling elated.
Very. Yeah, it's pretty surreal.
What goes into a search like this for you guys? I mean, these women had been missing since Wednesday night. I think the last time they were seen on camera was February 22nd. And they're mobile. They're moving. So
Yes.
What goes into a search like this?
So, it really started out with Topsham PD. They were doing the research, trying to figure out, really to try to find a breadcrumb trail of where they've been. They went to Massachusetts, they were all over everywhere. Then we get a picture in Springfield at Smith's General Store of Kim actually there that was on Wednesday. So that pushes the timeline up there. So there's just a great collaboration between us, state police, cell phone carriers, Maine Forest Service, everybody. As far as a community effort goes, you don't, in my experience, I've never seen one with this many agencies all coming together, because it literally was a needle in a haystack. We had no idea outside of the cell phone ping where things were. So, Friday and Saturday, there was some ground search, and we were using Maine Forest Service had their helicopter up. We had our fixed wing aircraft, looking, but after finding the vehicle, it was pretty unlikely that even the plane would have been able to see it because the car was covered with snow from the
Wow.
storm that happened on Friday. So, but we had a command post set up in Lincoln at the fire department, and they actually our team, our incident management team, they look at maps, they look at terrain, road systems, and they kind of divvy out where they want us to search. And that's what happened in this case, is that each warden, forest ranger, whomever was assisting, gives a is given a search area, and we tell people, we tell our officers, this is what we want you to do. My assignment was to run out every single log road I could find, check every camp that you could come in, that you could see, talk to anybody that you see along the way. And I mean, I saw, probably a dozen or more snowmobilers that day, yesterday, and I told them, well, they drove right by where the road that she was on, but they were looking for a car. They weren't looking for tracks or anything like that. So that's what really pushes us to check every, no stone left unturned, so to speak.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And
that's
thank
what
God
we
you
had to
did.
do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now these women, one of the photos you guys sent over, they're smiling in it. You said it seemed like they were okay. How were they when you found them? Just, I mean, were they confused, scared, happy?
No, they were, very much. I mean, I think the first minute or so they were, I don't know if they almost realized that I was there, so to speak. And then it was, can someone get in touch with my family? They need to know where we are. Are we close to Brunswick? And I'm like, no. I says, you're a really long ways from Brunswick. I said, but we're going to get you there. And and I told him, I said, I need to leave to go and bring other guys in so that we can take you guys out. And Angie, the other lady that was with Kim, she kind of hollered at me and she says, hurry up and get going.
Oh.
So it was pretty funny. It definitely lightened my mind up a lot that they knew what was going on. They knew, because as cold as it was, it's really an amazing feat of theirs to make it as long as they did. No question. When we were, a gentleman that had a camp nearby actually had a side-by-side with tracks, and it had heat. So he volunteered and he brought his machine over. We were able to take him out to the waiting vehicles. And he, when we were taking them out, because they'd been sitting for a long time, we kind of had to help them out of the car. And she had a Mountain Dew bottle. It was about half full. It was frozen solid. So that just goes to show, the temperatures that they endured, because those don't freeze as easily as water. So it takes a lot of cold to make that happen.
Wow.
So they were through a lot, went through a lot.
Brad, you have perfectly answered my questions. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you think is important, or anything you want to say about this?
I just really want to reiterate how much we appreciate the help that we received from the communities, whether it be a phone call that they saw this, or Facebook, and just the media in general, to bring awareness to all of this, because it never lost any steam. Everybody was doing everything that they could do to get the word out to people. I mean, we were getting phone calls that, this vehicle was seen over here. It really wasn't, but people cared. And that's a big piece of this, is it makes our job a lot easier when we're supported by everybody, and the outcome, was way beyond anything we imagined. especially given the circumstances.
Yeah, yeah, great outcome. Thanks to you.
Absolutely. It was right place, right time.